On 5th of March, a very eye-opening report emerged focusing on the danger of Islam in the UK. What is really interesting here is that homegrown terrorism is the biggest threat the country is going to face. But before I get into the report, I'd like to point out just a handful of other issues within around 2 to 3 minutes. Back in 1990s, like 25 years ago, there has been less than a million Muslims living in Britain, 1 in every 50. 25 years later, now there is nearly 3 million, 1 in every 20. Roughly around 75% increase in population within around just 2 decades. Next is prison. In some cases, roughly half of these inmates are Muslims or almost two-thirds of them. 1 in every 5 inmates in top security prison is a Muslim. And of course, it can be argued if the number of offenses that are reported actually represent the reality because there are enclaves or ghettos where police don't even feel safe to go. So if you commit a crime in those areas, it's unlikely that the crime will be reported and you will be charged. Nonetheless, if we still take these numbers into consideration, we have problems when half of these inmates are Muslims in some cases. In fact, we have problems not only with those Muslims inside the prison, but those outside the prison, precisely because we don't know how many of them out there at large. A survey conducted last year suggests that more than 100,000 British Muslims sympathize with the suicide bombers and people who commit other forms of terrorism. There are more British Muslims fighting as jihadists for ISIS than in the army, and the Muslims that are in the army is outnumbered by a third to those who are fighting for ISIS. You probably know that German intelligence agency was infiltrated last year, or more recently about Geert Wilders, who had to suspend his election campaign because his personal security details was compromised, or the assassination of the Russian ambassador who was shot at the point blank by a police officer. So it can be argued whether the people who are in the army should actually be there in the first place. In other words, whether these people are trustworthy of owning a weapon or given entrance into a secured military facility. These are valid questions. How trustworthy are these people to possess a weapon of mass destruction? How trustworthy? Anyway, I will leave it open. So, this is a typical scenario everywhere, all across. It's true in UK, it's true in Germany, Sweden, everywhere. Extremely high birth rate and dependency on the social welfare, more ghettos, more crimes and unreported crimes, much more prison inmates, extremely brutal violence, which I will get to in a minute, radicalization inside the prison, which again I will get to in a minute, and falling behind in all positive metrics, be it education or employment or women's rights. While the British citizens are unemployed at 5.4%, the rate jumps to 12.8% in case of Muslims, which is more than double than the peer groups. And regarding discrimination towards women, there are currently 85 Sharia courts running in the UK, closed doors, behind the doors, open doors, whatever it is, where women have to seek divorce even from their drug dealer husbands. And of course, there are many other things going on inside those places like Sharia courts or mosques or religious schools, which we have absolutely no idea of. Okay, now the report. Terrorism. Between 1998 and 2015, beheadings and stabbings increased from 4% to 44%. The number of Islamic terror offenses doubled from 12 to 23 in the years between 2010 and 2015. Until recently, we used to know that the majority of the terrorists are male, which is generally the case. But what has shockingly revealed, though, is that the radicalization among the female has increased by 175% during the period of 2010 to 2015. 175% only. Almost two-thirds of this terrorism has been committed by British nationals. These are not people coming from outside like Africa or Middle East. These are people who are born within Britain. Almost half of the terrorists came from one city, and the champion is London. No wonder why Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has a plan for an additional 1.5 million people into the city by 2020. Again, whether it's a good idea to elect a Muslim as the mayor of your city remains open for the debate. Perhaps the liberals and feminists who voted for him would be able to answer it properly, I guess. 1 in every 4 who committed this terrorism had higher education. These are not uneducated people. So when our politicians make assumptions that because of poverty and lack of education people turn to jihad and spend billions of dollars from the hardworking taxpayers into those countries to build infrastructure in the hope that things will change, nothing happens. Nothing happened in Pakistan, nothing happened in Afghanistan, and nothing happened in the UK either, where there is no poverty or lack of education. Maybe off topic, but the leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, has a PhD in Islamic studies. A total of 117 incidents were committed by individuals directly linked to one or more proscribed, banned terrorist organizations. So these organizations are banned in public, but definitely they are operating underneath. As I said before, we have absolutely no idea of what's going on inside the mosque or inside the religious schools or Sharia courts or even in the neighborhoods. 76% of these offenses were committed by individuals who were previously known to the authorities, and 38% had a previous conviction. So 1 in every 3 actually committed a similar crime before. So what about the sentence? What happens once they get convicted of these terror offenses? They are jailed for up to 4 years, 35% of the cases. Again, 1 in every 3. So after 4 years, 35% of these criminals would be allowed to walk freely in the streets. So the question is, what these people are going to do once they get out of the prison? Okay, so now I will get into some other details. Extremely brutal violence and violence against minors. The politicians that cannot protect your daughters, the politicians that talk too high and loud about tolerance and diversity and multiculturalism, the politicians that give sanctuary to pedophiles and criminals and scumbags in your neighborhood, should you be concerned for them? Well, if you live in Rotherham, you should be very concerned for being called racist. And because of these politicians, little girls are not safe, even at home, while pedophiles and rapists and scums have the guts to knock at the doors of these little kids even at midnight, to call their parents white bastards while threatening the life of these children. Welcome to Great Britain. Yes, you heard it right, the Great Britain. On June 23, 2016, British people made their decision to leave the single market, which unequivocally shocked the liberals. However, liberals were not shocked when thousands of white British children, predominantly Christian, were systematically raped and abused in the British town of Rotherham by Pakistani Muslim gangs for decades. Wherever Islam goes, it brings out the ugliest of a human being. Women being oppressed, gays and Jews murdered, children being gang raped and murdered. But here we have a very unique phenomenon. We don't see it outside of Islam. It's an affair of the whole family, as the whole family, father, son, cousin, brother, everybody joins together to gang rape minor British children. We don't see it anywhere else except the superior teachings of Islam and its Prophet Muhammad. And in some cases, these poor girls were raped by as many as 90 men over the weekend, while the authorities kept saying that the victim wasn't at risk. Apart from Rotherham, there are many other places where similar stories emerged. A book titled Easy Meat detailed these findings. The writer concluded that at least 100,000, once again, 100,000 girls were raped and abused by Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK over the last 3 decades. The scale and intensity of this heinous act is so widespread that even the MP of Rotherham admitted that this is happening in every village, in every town, and in every city. However, these rapists and scums who committed these crimes are as good Muslims they are, who not only believe that they are above the law, but they have the good sense to play the victim card yet again blaming the police for their moral depravity. And here's the final point: sentence and radicalization inside the prison. Couple of years back, Ayat Albatiki, a Jordanian-born kebab shop owner living in Britain, was recorded saying he raped a 13-year-old white British girl, Caroline Downs, killed her and put her in a meat grinder and made her into kebab. Caroline Downs, who disappeared from Blackpool area in 2003, is believed to be sexually abused by as many as 100 men before being murdered and chopped up for kebab meat. Many believe that Paige Chivers, another missing teenager from Blackpool, had faced the same unfortunate destiny. In 2007, 2 business partners were tried for this sickening incident. However, a jury failed to reach a verdict, and subsequently the killers, Ayat Albatiki and Mohamed Rapshi, received 6-figure compensation sums for false imprisonment. If you still think that raping a young British girl and putting her into kebab is a crime anymore in Great Britain, then you are totally wrong. But you'd be certainly right about the consequences of putting a piece of bacon in a British mosque. Yes, it's a very, very serious offense, and the guy who did it was put into jail for 12 months, where he died 6 months later. So what happens in a British prison? Here are a few things. Drug dealing, obviously. Collecting jizya from non-Muslims. Yes, collecting jizya. Forced conversion, and if you don't comply, you'll be beaten to death, like in this case. And recruitment for extremist groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. There are many more Muslim inmates, so when a non-Muslim is imprisoned for speaking against Islam, he or she becomes an immediate target of these criminal gangs inside the prison, and that's the reason why these men had to die a very brutal death. So the judge who sent him to prison in the first place is undoubtedly a disgrace, as the crime does not match the sentence. And then inside the prison he was a target, and he was a scapegoat, and he was killed to make the rest of the community feared and silenced by these homegrown terrorists, which again prove why Islam and Muslim are a threat to the British society and the rest of us. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share this message, and please consider subscribing if this kind of materials you would like to see in future as well. Thanks for watching, and before I finish, remember those rapists and scums who played their victim card while condemning the police to show themselves as good Muslims? Yes, here is another example, and I will leave it for you to judge. Thank you.
This area now is literally just a complete Muslim area. It's got 19 mosques all within a stone's throw, and plans for another 6.
So driving through this area, are you unwelcome here?
Oh yeah, I'm completely unwelcome here, yeah.
What would happen if you were to walk through the streets here?
If I was walking the streets, I'd get battered. If I tried to walk from one end to the other, I wouldn't get out. Because they get on their phones so quickly. There's Saiful Islam, that one there. Yeah, he's the leader. Yeah. What? What have I got to talk to you about? What have I got to talk to you about? What have I got to talk to you about?
What have you got to say about Islam and that, innit?
Yeah, I have,
yeah. Yeah? So why didn't you say it now?
What do you want me to say? It's
Yeah?
a ideology, it's got no place.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's got no place, bruv.
And what you
Sharia
got?
law's got no place in
What
this
you
country.
got?
What do you mean, what have I got?
Go on, tell me,
What do you
innit?
mean,
What do you
have I
stand
got?
for?
What do I stand for?
Yeah, what do you stand for?
Integration, bruv. I don't stand for paedophilic practices, yeah?
Yeah? What do you stand for? Go on, tell me.
What do you mean, what do I stand for? What do you
Racism,
stand for?
hatred.
How's it racism?
Eh?
How's it racism? How's it racist to oppose a fascist ideology?
Fascist ideology.
It is
And what do
fascist.
you? You're racist.
How am I racist?
You hate Asians,
what
yeah?
race? What race are
Yeah,
Asians?
yeah.
What race are Muslims?
I heard. Come on,
Get out,
Cam.
get out,
Where are you
get out.
running away
Oh,
from?
because I know
Why
you,
you running
I know,
away
because I know
for?
what you like, bruv. You have
Where
about
you-
100 you in a minute. You f***ing little chief. You f***ing chief. Prick. You see? That is Islam.